Greetings and welcome back to 303 in Junior English. As we turn now to Raymond Carver and his text, Everything Stuck to Him. Let's go ahead now and just say a few pieces of information. We're on 1324, 1325 and following in your hymnals. Let's begin first of all with dates and some biographic information on Carver. Notice dates, 1938 to 1988. Carver is one of a handful, I'm reading with you on 1325. Raymond Carver is one of a handful of authors said to have revitalized the art of short story writing in the late 1900s. Born in a small Oregon logging town to a mill worker and a waitress, Carver grew up penniless in Washington State. As an adult, wow, this will be interesting because you're from Wyoming, and so he grows up out here in the West. As an adult, he drew heavily from his life and his writings about the hardships of the working poor. First heading, Inauspicious Beginnings. At age 19, 1 year after graduating from high school, Carver married his 16-year-old sweetheart. By age 20, he had fathered 2 children. Struggling to support his family, Carver took on a series of jobs, including work as a janitor, a sawmill worker, and a gas station attendant. So let's just pause and put it in your notes. This is one more example of a writer who did real, well, I'm going to call it real work. That is to say, work with your hands. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to just intellectual work of the writing. After moving his family to California in 1958, Carver began studying at Chico State College. There he took a creative writing course taught by the acclaimed novelist John Gardner, who quickly became his mentor. Carver worked nights and took classes during the day. He later attended the prestigious Iowa Writers' Workshop and in 1967 received critical praise for his story, Will You Please Be Quiet, Please? A turning point. Next heading. In 1971, Carver began publishing his work in Esquire magazine, where he began a decade-long partnership with editor Gordon Lish. Lish encouraged a less is more approach to writing. As a result, Carver's writing became lean and sparse, earning him a reputation as a minimalist. A few years later, Carver published his short story collection, Will You Please Be Quiet, Please? And his career took off. Final heading, opening up. In the 1980s, Carver parted ways with Lish and his work grew more expansive. Then in 1983, Carver won an award that changed his life. The Mildred and Harold Strauss Livings Award brought with it 5 years of tax-free income and gave Carver financial independence. He earned celebrity treatment with profiles in the New York Times Magazine, Vanity Fair, and People Magazine. In 1984, his short story collection, Cathedral, was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. Carver divorced his first wife in 1982, and in 1988 he married the poet Tess Gallinger. That same year, Carver published his final collection of stories and was inducted into the American Academy and Institutes of Arts and Letters. A few months later, at age 50, Carver succumbed to lung cancer. He is remembered as one of the greatest storytellers of his time. We're going to turn here in a second to the story, Everything Stuck to Him. Let's go ahead and work now at 2B for a moment in literary analysis. I'm on 1324. All writers, I'm reading, all writers use language and may even explore similar themes or events. What distinguishes one writer from another is the author's style. Let's write that down in 2B. How he or she uses language. Many literary elements, including word choice, sentence length, complexity, types of images, types of subject matter, contribute to style. Raymond Carver's style, which is one of the most influential in contemporary literature, is marked by certain traits. Let's list them. There's 4 of them. He favors an economy of words and suggests more than he states. So this is a short story, but he's going to say a lot in it. His restraint, number 2, his restrained use of language creates a distance, almost subdued emotional attitude or tone. 3, he focuses on the lives of the working poor, a reoccurring theme. And finally, 4, his characters often seem to struggle unsuccessfully to find words to express what they see and feel. They persist in a quiet isolation. As you read, look for these elements of Carver's intense, pared down style and think about how they affect the meaning, mood, and power of the story. Under reading strategy, when reading fiction, asking questions can clarify your understanding of passages, relationships, or events that may at first seem unclear. For example, in this story, the time frame moves back and forth between an outer or frame story narrated by the author to an inner story narrated by one of the main characters. Clarify your understanding by asking questions about the characters and events, and then, of course, you can use a chart like the one to your right there. Do notice the 4 vocab words at the bottom of 1324 as well to help you. Okay, we're going to jump now to the background information at the top of 1327. This is a frame story. You want to write that down at 2B. This is a frame story, or a story within a story. There are many frame narratives in world literature, including, of course, the Arabian Nights, the Canterbury Tales that we'll study when you are a senior. The notorious jumping frog of Calaveras County that we did earlier by Mark Twain is an American example. To be a genuine frame narrative, the introductory story must be of secondary importance to the internal one. Consider whether this is true of Carver's tale. So we got a story within a story going on here. Now, let's jot this down again at 2B. We're going to have an interesting conflict at play here. So write this down. What is the conflict of this story? And at plot interest, write down what is the climax of this story. We maybe want to ask that as well. All right? So we've got a couple of very interesting things that are going to happen in the story within a story. All right, we'll now read the story together. Pay particular attention as we read. Pay close attention. And let's go to work with it now. Okay? Everything stuck to him. Raymond Carver. Let's go to work.
Everything Stuck to Him by Raymond Carver. She's in Milan for Christmas and wants to know what it was like when she was a kid. Tell me, she says. Tell me what it was like when I was a kid. She sips Strega, waits, eyes him closely. She is a cool, slim, attractive girl, a survivor from top to bottom. That was a long time ago. That was 20 years ago, he says. You can remember, she says. Go on. What do you want to hear, he says. What else can I tell you? I could tell you about something that happened when you were a baby. It involves you, he says, but only in a minor way. Tell me, she says. But first, fix us another so you won't have to stop in the middle. He comes back from the kitchen with drinks, settles into his chair, begins. They were kids themselves, but they were crazy in love, this 18-year-old boy and this 17-year-old girl, when they married. Not all that long afterwards, they had a daughter. The baby came along in late November during a cold spell that just happened to coincide with the peak of the waterfowl season. The boy loved to hunt, you see. That's part of it. The boy and girl, husband and wife, father and mother, they lived in a little apartment under a dentist's office. Each night, they cleaned the dentist's place upstairs in exchange for rent and utilities. In summer, they were expected to maintain the lawn and the flowers. In winter, the boys shoveled snow and spread rock salt on the walks. Are you still with me? Are you getting the picture? I am, she says. That's good, he says. So, one day, the dentist finds out they were using his letterhead for their personal correspondence, but that's another story. He gets up from his chair and looks out the window. He sees the tile rooftops and the snow that is falling steadily on them. Tell the story, she says. The two kids were very much in love. On top of this, they had great ambitions. They were always talking about the things they were going to do and the places they were going to go. Now the boy and girl slept in the bedroom and the baby slept in the living room. Let's say the baby was about 3 months old and had only just begun to sleep through the night. On this one Saturday night, after finishing his work upstairs, the boy stayed in the dentist's office and called an old hunting friend of his father's. Carl, he said when the man picked up the receiver. Believe it or not, I'm a father. Congratulations, Carl said. How is the wife? She's fine, Carl. Everybody's fine. That's good, Carl said. I'm glad to hear it. But if you called about going hunting, I'll tell you something. The geese are flying to beat the band. I don't think I've ever seen so many. Got 5 today. Going back in the morning. So come along if you want to. I want to, the boy said. The boy hung up the telephone and went downstairs to tell the girl. She watched while he laid out his things. Hunting coat, shell bag, boots, socks, hunting cap, long underwear, pump gun. What time will you be back? The girl said. Probably around noon, the boy said, but maybe as late as 6 o'clock. Would that be too late? It's fine, she said. The baby and I will get along fine. You go and have some fun. When you get back, we'll dress the baby up and go visit Sally. The boy said, sounds like a good idea. Sally was the girl's sister. She was striking. I don't know if you've seen pictures of her. The boy was a little in love with Sally, just as he was a little in love with Betsy, who was another sister the girl had. The boy used to say to the girl, "If we weren't married, I could go for Sally." "What about Betsy?" the girl used to say. "I hate to admit it, but I truly feel she's better looking than Sally and me. What about Betsy?" "Betsy too," the boy used to say. After dinner, he turned up the furnace and helped her bathe the baby. He marveled again at the infant who had half his features and half the girl's. He powdered the tiny body. He powdered between fingers and toes. He emptied the bath into the sink and went upstairs to check the air. It was overcast and cold. The grass, what there was of it, looked like canvas, stiff and gray under the streetlight. Snow lay in piles beside the walk. A car went by. He heard sand under the tires. He let himself imagine what it might be like tomorrow, geese beating the air over his head, shotgun plunging against his shoulder. Then he locked the door and went downstairs. In bed, they tried to read, but both of them fell asleep, she first, letting the magazine sink to the quilt. It was the baby's cries that woke him up. The light was on out there, and the girl was standing next to the crib, rocking the baby in her arms. She put the baby down, turned out the light, and came back to the bed. He heard the baby cry. This time the girl stayed where she was. The baby cried fitfully and stopped. The boy listened, then dozed. But the baby's cries woke him again. The living room light was burning. He sat up and turned on the lamp. "I don't know what's wrong," the girl said, walking back and forth with the baby. "I've changed her and fed her, but she keeps on crying. I'm so tired, I'm afraid I might drop her." "You come back to bed," the boy said. "I'll hold her for a while." He got up and took the baby, and the girl went to lie down again. "Just rock her for a few minutes," the girl said from the bedroom. "Maybe she'll go back to sleep." The boy sat on the sofa and held the baby. He jiggled it in his lap until he got its eyes to close, his own eyes closing right along. He rose carefully and put the baby back in the crib. It was 3:45, which gave him 45 minutes. He crawled into bed and dropped off, but a few minutes later, the baby was crying again, and this time they both got up. The boy did a terrible thing. He swore. "For God's sake, what's the matter with you?" the girl said to the boy. "Maybe she's sick or something. Maybe we shouldn't have given her the bath." The boy picked up the baby. The baby kicked its feet and smiled. "Look," the boy said, "I really don't think there's anything wrong with her." "How do you know that?" the girl said. "Here, let me have her. I know I ought to give her something, but I don't know what it's supposed to be." The girl put the baby down again. The boy and the girl looked at the baby, and the baby began to cry. The girl took the baby. "Baby, baby," the girl said with tears in her eyes. "Probably it's something on her stomach," the boy said. Girl didn't answer. She went on rocking the baby, paying no attention to the boy. The boy waited. He went to the kitchen and put on water for coffee. He drew his woolen underwear on over his shorts and t-shirt, buttoned up, then got into his clothes. "What are you doing?" the girl said. "Going hunting," the boy said. "I don't think you should," she said. "I don't want to be left alone with her like this." "Carl's planning on me going," the boy said. "We've planned it." "I don't care about what you and Carl planned," she said. "And I don't care about Carl either. I don't even know Carl." "You've met Carl before. You know him," the boy said. "What do you mean you don't know him?" "That's not the point, and you know it," the girl said. "What is the point?" the boy said. "The point is we planned it." The girl said, "I'm your wife. This is your baby. She's sick or something. Look at her. Why else is she crying?" "I know you're my wife," the boy said. The girl began to cry. She put the baby back in the crib, but the baby started up again. The girl dried her eyes on the sleeve of her nightgown and picked the baby up. The boy laced up his boots. He put on his shirt, his sweater, his coat. The kettle whistled on the stove in the kitchen. "You're going to have to choose," the girl said. "Carl or us. I mean it." "What do you mean?" the boy said. "You heard what I said," the girl said. "If you want a family, you're going to have to choose." They stared at each other. Then the boy took up his hunting gear and went outside. He started the car. He went around to the car windows and, making a job of it, scraped away the ice. He turned off the motor and sat a while. And then he got out and went back inside. The living room light was on. The girl was asleep on the bed. The baby was asleep beside her. The boy took off his boots. Then he took off everything else. In his socks and his long underwear, he sat on the sofa and read the Sunday paper. The girl and the baby slept on. After a while, the boy went to the kitchen and started frying bacon. The girl came out in her robe and put her arms around the boy. "Hey," the boy said. "I'm sorry," the girl said. "It's all right," the boy said. "I didn't mean to snap like that." "It was my fault," he said. "You sit down," the girl said. "How does a waffle sound with bacon?" "Sounds great," the boy said. She took the bacon out of the pan and made waffle batter. He sat at the table and watched her move around the kitchen. She put a plate in front of him with bacon, a waffle. He spread butter and poured syrup. But when he started to cut, he turned the plate into his lap. "I don't believe it," he said, jumping up from the table. "If you could see yourself," the girl said. The boy looked down at himself, at everything stuck to his underwear. "I was starved," he said, shaking his head. "You were starved," she said, laughing. He peeled off the woolen underwear and threw it at the bathroom door. Then he opened his arms, and the girl moved into them. "We won't fight anymore," she said. The boy said, "We won't." He gets up from his chair and refills their glasses. "That's it," he says. "End of story." I admit it's not much of a story. "I was interested," she says. He shrugs and carries his drink over to the window. It's dark now, but still snowing. "Things change," he says. "I don't know how they do, but they do without you realizing it or wanting them to." "Yes, that's true, only..." But she does not finish what she started. She drops the subject. In the window's reflection, he sees her study her nails. Then she raises her head. Speaking brightly, she asks if he is going to show her the city after all. He says, "Put your boots on and let's go." But he stays by the window, remembering. They had laughed. They had leaned on each other and laughed until the tears had come, while everything else, the cold and where he'd go in it, was outside. For a while, anyway.
All right, now I've had juniors that say that this is one of the most compelling stories that we've studied together in our junior year. It certainly is a compelling story in terms of its ending, yes? So let's now work through level 1 really quickly. Now obviously it's a story within a story, so let's go ahead and make sure we understand this at level 1. We got 2 different stories going on. Let's list them both. The first story, of course, is a father talking to his daughter, and she is visiting him in Milan, Italy, right? And so you kind of get a sense that maybe they haven't spoken for a while, and the daughter shows up and she says, "Hey, I'd like to know a good story from when I was young," which again kind of tells you that maybe they haven't talked a lot. Maybe something has gone on. Now, of course, we're going to find out that one of the things that's probably gone on is that the father and the mother have separated, or something's happened, so that we don't have this closeness. And so he's going to tell his story. Of course, the story that he tells is the middle part of the story, and that is, of course, from an earlier time, when she's now older, right, daughter was very, very young. And of course, she was sick, and the mother basically threw down an ultimatum and told her husband, "You're not going hunting." He goes out like he's going to go hunting. He changes his mind and he comes in. She makes him breakfast. He tries to eat the breakfast, but it falls all over him. It sticks to him. And then at the very end of that part of the story, they say to each other, hey, let's not fight anymore, my bad. But of course, we finish the story back in Milan, where there's kind of this interesting exchange. Things change, he says. And then he kind of stands by the window remembering, right, this event. This little anecdote, this little story has brought back into his mind powerful emotions. Now, that's at level 1. That's basically what happens. But at level 2, as we start to interpret this story, obviously we got a whole lot more going on. So let's pay attention to it for a few moments. First of all, let's go ahead and identify that this is a story filled with very interesting tension of two kinds. Tension in the present, a father being reunited with his daughter in Milan and having to tell this story, and of course tension in the past, in a story that maybe began to show the cracks of a relationship, right? One of the things that makes Carver's prose so compelling is all the stuff that's not said but implied. Let's jot down at level 2A some possible messages, themes here. 1. Obviously, one possible message and theme has to do with the idea that parents have to make sacrifices that children cannot understand and don't even know about. I mean, note the irony. Obviously, the young girl has grown up to be very successful. She's never heard this story about one night when she cried through the night and basically required her father to miss a hunting experience. Another possible message. Love is always about sacrifices. And of course, as we ask at 3B here in a